Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle Haas. If you had to restart your comic collection, what would you buy? A very interesting question posed by friend of the channel, Phil, Vintage Comics and Toys, a great seller, dealer, comic collector. Go follow his Instagram account. He made this post earlier this week, kind of putting this question forward. And I thought it was video worthy. I thought it was a good topic to kind of discuss and talk about, in his particular video, which, I'll put a link in the description if you guys want to watch it. He mentioned that as a comic book dealer, he's been noticing, the trend of a lot of people selling off their collections and trying to start fresh. So in this video, I wanted to talk about that, talk about some of the things that people are saying in this comments. Maybe you guys can share your own thoughts of what you would do if you were starting over your comic book collection today. And then later on in the video, I'll talk about what I would personally do if I was starting all over. But of course, before I get into the video, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps support the channel doing those things. But let us get into this video here today. What comics would you buy if you can restart your comic book collection? Now, again, this is an interesting topic because while it does feel like we're maybe coming towards the end of the cycle of people kind of selling off all their collections, I feel like the majority of that stuff was more in 2023. You talk to a lot of dealers and comic book stores, they'll tell you, at that time, comic book collections were flying into the shops, flying into their hands. Now it feels like, they are still out there, they are still coming, but maybe a little bit slower. But I still think that this is very relevant, especially to the video I made yesterday about Hall H coming to San Diego Comic-Con. If we do enter kind of a new sort of quote unquote bull cycle for comic books once again, what are the things that we should change to our approach in comic book collecting? Well, let's see what other collectors had to say. Funny, I did this exact thing in late 2018 when I got back into the hobby. Sold my original childhood collection before prices skyrocketed in the early 10s. First decision was to go with drawer boxes as a storage option for the ease of use. Funny, the first key I bought, not by any design, was Miracle Man #1 by Alan Moore. I went to a local con and started digging in the $1 bins. Dealers must have had 15 copies. I took the sharpest one. If I had to redo my collection today, I would save up for an AF-15, knock that off the list first, and then go to ASM-1 next. Big books first, and play with minor keys after. They'll be easy to get. Do you guys agree with that? Do you think that going for the AF-15 or the ASM-1 would be the right way to start over your collection today? I think one of the problems with that is, when you start comic book collecting, if you could flash forward in time and see how much money you actually did put into your comic books, I mean, maybe it would hit that price point of like, hey, based on this, I could get a nice copy of A15. I could get a Detective 31. I could actually spend some real money based on all of the books I actually bought. But I feel like for most people, you don't necessarily know that when you start comic book collecting that you're going to, have spent $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 over your collecting life cycle. If you actually knew that, then absolutely just buy the A15 right out the gate. But at the same time, too, it's not actually one that I personally would follow because once you buy the AF-15, your money is sort of locked into that book. You don't have the ability to trade up or find equity out there in the, secondary market when you're hunting and stuff like that. So that's kind of another thing, but I'll unpack, those thoughts later on in the video. I would focus on building the first Batman 100 run, then the first ASM 100 run, only without distraction. After that, some major keys from other series to complement the collection. I think that that's a pretty good strategy, if your approach is that you want to preserve, value in your comic books. This is something that I'm going to talk about actually later on in the video with my short box speech. I'm going to reference another slide from my short box speech, which is, kind of talking about how, other people really like Batman. Other people really like Spider-Man. I think the reason that this person is saying that they would collect the things that are the most popular, the two most popular characters, is because there's always going to be that demand out there that if you ever decide to sell your comic book. So I kind of understand this strategy. It takes a little bit of the fun out of it that if you're not a Batman fan or a Spider-Man fan, then, it's sort of like, well, why are you really collecting this stuff? But if you are, this is definitely a good approach because you can enjoy it and you can also know that other people will enjoy it as well. I've kind of sort of been doing this. I sold a bunch of short boxes of books that I had. I still have my Batman Rebirth 1 through 149 as well as some other Batman keys. Mostly I'm collecting pretty covers without trade dress. I found a great seller on Whatnot that constantly restocks. I get most for $5. I'm really mostly just a collector of covers now. Collecting of covers, I think that most people are collectors of covers, which I realize is not going to be, a popular thing to hear for a lot of people out there because, comic books are meant to be read. I totally get it. But at the same time, cool covers are cool covers, whether it's a modern variant or a golden age comic book. Once I have my Spider-Man and X-Men collection close to 90%, I will let the rest go. But I'm sitting on a lot of raw keys from silver to modern. So I take it that that's the approach. Once I have my Spider-Man and X-Men collection close to 90%, I'll sell the rest of it. Again, this is another situation, sort of like I would focus on Batman and Spider-Man. This person sort of inferring, if I am understanding this correctly, that they would go with Spider-Man and X-Men first. And again, sort of another good strategy, as far as like if you were starting over today and you were going to put money into this, what would you do? It feels like what a lot of people are saying is they would target the most popular characters, Batman, Spider-Man, X-Men. I'm actually doing this. I started buying comics when I was 13, 25 years later, and it's overwhelming. I'm keeping the keys, but selling the run fillers. I'm going to just focus on high-grade blue chips. Kind of another sentiment right there that I think, I'll reference my journey of the comic book collector whiteboard video. You eventually are going to hit this point where if you kind of don't narrow in and focus on what you really like, what you really love, all the other comic books tend to be distractions or can pull you off into other directions. I actually started my collection again last year. I used to collect Marvel, DC, and Spawn, sold mostly everything but Spawn I had since early 2000s. Deathstroke from Arkham series and Gambit from Toy Biz. Now I'm collecting more anime statues and figures, some horror movies and game characters, Bandai, Sega, Marvel figures. I did start getting some pops, some signed, but gonna sell them. This particular person basically saying, if I were gonna restart my comic book collection, I wouldn't buy comic books. I would buy toys instead, which frankly, based on, socials and some of the prices that the toys are selling for, it feels like the toy statue market is a lot bigger than comic books. And in fact, it pains me to sort of say this. I gotta admit, guys, of all the pop cultural collectible trades there are, I kind of feel like comic books is on the lower side of the spectrum. I mean, we are way behind sports cards. We are way behind Pokemon cards. We are way behind toys, statues, Star Wars collecting. We're definitely, on the bottom rung, which is kind of sad. Bronze horror, blanked remark sketch covers, Vampirella 9/8 70s mags, horror and monster mags in 9/8, video game 1 9/8 like Super Mario Brothers. I mean, I guess if you wanted to have quote unquote the hottest comics within the last couple months, it would have been nice to have been buying this stuff when you started so that you could be capitalizing on them right now. Buy whatever you can at good value and then flip or trade them for what you really want. Same as it ever was. Great time to be buying when people are dumping. Silver Surfer FF48, I completely agree with this comment right here. And that has actually been my own personal strategy. I mean, if I were going to start over my comic book collection today, nothing would really change with my behaviors. It's sort of been, how I've always kind of approached the hobby where, when I'm out there, I still am buying what I like, but I'm always buying, deals. I'm buying opportunities. I'm letting books come to me. Let books find you. One of my favorite videos from back in the day. Go out there, hunt in the wild, and if you see a good book that you like and it's being sold at discount, pick that thing up. And then if you actually want to trade it, use some of that equity to eventually work your way towards that AF-15 or that ASM-1, that can be a good approach for sure. Now, before I share my little short box slide, I did do some Googling, with this. When Phil made this post and brought up this topic in conversation, I actually wanted to see if there were other threads that had actually talked about this. And I found one from 2021. This was 3 years ago, but I thought it still was sort of interesting to discuss and talk about with you guys in this video. Starting over seems improbable. I'm looking for advice on returning to collecting comics after a long hiatus. So much has changed, and right now I'm so discouraged that I'm too far removed. I collected and enjoy reading comics from about 10 years old to 20 25. Thereafter, life happened, blah, blah, blah. Now that I'm pushing 40, the MCU has sparked my interest again. I used to be able to buy ASM 50 and ASM 300 for $25 and $30. Now those keys are way more expensive than I could ever imagine. I'm basically paraphrasing. I thought treating myself to spend $100 on a book every few weeks would be nice, but $100 gets me nothing. Any help on where to start again? I just want to scroll down to this comment right here that I thought was actually pretty decent advice. I went through the same thing a couple years ago, had gotten rid of 90% of my collection before a home relocation, and started over in 2019. A few things. Prices are pretty high right now. Many books have doubled their value during the pandemic because at-home hobbies are on the rise. I mean, even though we've had a correction, that is still basically true. I mean, the prices for most books are still higher than that of 2020. You can still find some decent deals if you hold out. Very, very key phrase, hold out right there. Big spreads in prices on eBay. Good ones go quick, but you can find them. Totally agree with that. You can totally still find hidden gems at used bookstores, thrift stores, etc. Typically not the big keys, of course, but I found a few books with $200 or more in dollar bins. This is another great point. Again, go out there in the wild, guys. Find those books. Hunting is the key. Buying books at discount and getting that instant equity will really be a way to improve your collection. With today's prices, some of us modest collectors have to settle for lower grades, restored books, slower collecting rate, just the way it is. I feel you. And I actually really like the statement right here, slower collecting rate. That would be something that I would say, if you're going to go into comic books, if you were going to restart today, I would embrace the idea of the slower collecting rate. Right? Everything in 2021, everything, in the pandemic, people were going crazy, right? And you had so much FOMO. Like, you have time. That's the thing that I would say, to people if they're starting over. It's like, identify the books that you want and realize that you have time. Slow it down. It's okay. It's all about the journey. It's all about the journey. Now, last thing is, I mentioned my little short box speech. Last time I brought up a slide from the speech, it definitely spawned an interesting conversation about how nothing is rare. I wanted to share another one, which is one of the graphics that I actually made for one of the points I made in my speech, which I said, buy what you like is wrong sometimes, and I corrected it to buy what you, but mostly other people like, and I showed this graphic right here. I think that this has been a lot of my approach, and this may not be for everybody, but I do think it is a good thing to consider. Even if you're somebody who never wants to sell comic books, or you never want to flip stuff, or you're gonna have your comic books forever. I mean, sometimes life happens, right? You might need to sell a key here and there to pay for something, and so in those instances, it would still be good to have the option to, sell it to somebody who actually wants it. So it's kind of this chart here where you have the left side, which is the circle of what other people like to buy. And then you have the right side, which is the circle of what you like to buy. And then there's the cross section, which I think is sort of the best place to live in. That's not to say that you can't buy, a bunch of Darkhawk books here and there, even though everybody else likes Spider-Man and Batman. But, if you buy the AF-15, I mean, you'll never go wrong. So buy what you and other people like. And this doesn't always apply to books. This can sometimes apply to, being discerning. You may be that person that doesn't care about faded colors on your comic books, and so you're like, oh, well, I'll just buy this 4.0 because it's a faded cover. Like, who cares? I don't care about it. But other people do, as you guys can see from the price difference of these X-Men books that sold around the same time. You may not care about newsstand copies, right? You may actually prefer the direct edition, but at the same time, if it's, equal, if you're digging in a bin and you find a newsstand one versus a direct edition one, I mean, maybe you should buy what other people like, which is other people like the newsstand one. Or you may not care about CGC or CBCS or, these grading companies, but, at the same time, it is still true to this day that CGC sells for more than that of CBCS. So buy what you and other people like, and that might be a good approach if you are starting over your comic book collection today. Anyways, that's all for this video. I thought that this was an interesting topic to bring up. Let me know in the comments if you guys have any advice for other people out there. I'd love to hear what you guys think. If you were going to restart your comic book collection today, what would you buy? How would you approach it? And what would you do with all that money that you had in your pocket? Anyways, thanks so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. See you all in the next video.